And repeat after me. I believe this is the Word of God. I believe what God says because it is impossible for God to lie.
America, I no longer fight for you or protect your military endeavors and conquests. You have had your way with the weaker nations of the world, but that is ending. There is no coincidence concerning the names of the ships Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan. They will suffer the same fates as their namesakes. When you see this, you will know that all I have spoken is true, and that the complete destruction is coming to the once greatest nation of all. You have turned your back on me, your first love. The fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 17 is very near. It will no longer be inhabited as a city when this event comes to pass. It will become a ruinous heap. These events will run in parallel with what I have revealed about the kickoff event planned for America. Specifically in New York City, and even more specifically, Manhattan and Trump Tower will be involved. Your current king was brought into office to begin your judgment, but your former king shall return as the events proceed and finish it. He will oversee your destruction and then move on to his role as the leader of the 10 kings. Barack Hussein Obama will be the flesh and blood manifestation of Satan on the earth. After the kickoff event, the highest idol America has will be taken down first, her wealth. Attempts will be made to prop the economy back up, but they will be unsuccessful. The fall of America will continue until it hits the absolute bottom. People will cry out for protection from the government and martial law will be declared. Most will cry and weep for the days of old, but they will never return. You are the last generation, and you are very close to the time of your revealing to the world. As I have told you before, my glory comes upon you as the destruction and cataclysm comes upon the whole earth. As soon as the kickoff event happens, we will be able to hear the Lord more clearly and with greater volume. Bankers and the wealthy know that this is coming because this is part of the New World Order plan to bring in the new financial system, which will be the beast system. Most will not understand that this has been all planned for years, and now the stage has been set and all the players are in place. War on America will come on every front and internally. In the coming days, the fire kickoff event will indeed take place. Prophecy will become tomorrow's headlines, even before the transformation of my bride. And if you're not ready, and you have not accepted the Lord Jesus Christ, Yeshua HaMashiach, as your personal Lord and Savior, and do not delay. Today is the day of salvation. You are not guaranteed tomorrow. Neither am I. Nobody is.
So, part 2. Let's finish this on up. Little reading of a book. You know what I mean? Hope everybody got, a little introductory with part 1, dealing with some things that are going on in the air, especially when Our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ told us to look up because our redemption draweth nigh. So we're supposed to pay attention to what's going on in the skies, right? So about these chemtrails. Chemtrails have been dismissed as simply being ordinary contrails forming odd ice particles at high levels, thereby creating the odd colors that are often seen in chemtrails. But such claims don't hold up well to the facts, even though everyone from the military to weathermen often promote this theory. Such an explanation fails to account for the sudden appearance of massive contrails where they are seldom seen before. Their abrupt appearance suggests that something has changed within the formulation of jet fuels or that an additive has been mixed into the fuel. That change can't be the sudden emergence of water vapor in jet exhaust, since jets have been around from the time that the first experimental jet taxied down a Nazi runway toward the end of World War II. For contrails to abruptly appear in the 1990s makes no sense unless something different was being done to jet fuels from that time on. To believe otherwise requires an amazing suspicion of logic, though, and this is what both the mainstream media and U.S. government seem to expect of American citizens. So what is happening? There are several possibilities. Chemtrails are an effort to combat global warming by creating clouds that will reflect sunlight back into the space, as well as to help block radiation coming to Earth through damaged sections of the ozone layer. Some who propose this theory suggest the government might engage in this activity in order to avoid admitting that some of the experiments conducted on the ionosphere, more on those in a bit, have created dangerous damage to this protective layer above the Earth. Moisture is being injected into the atmosphere to enhance various types of detection and communication equipment. Is one system often named in this theory is the Navy's RFMP, that is a radio frequency mission planner system, as well as its VTRPE, variable terrain radio parabolic equation, both of which work well in the humid air but are apparently marginal in dry air. Proponents of this theory also sometimes believe that the chemtrails are a mixture of barium salts and water, which would be most ideal for improving this communications system. This theory may have an element of truth in it, given that barium salt chemtrails appear to have been employed by the United States Navy to enhance its REMP capabilities in Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Barium salts are being added to enhance the capabilities of the United States Air Force's HARP system. More on this program in a bit. The additives appearing in chemtrails are placed there by a DARPA is with an eye toward developing a system to rapidly decontaminate large areas poisoned by biological and or chemical agents. Some proponents of this theory believe and barium salts are being mixed with polymer filaments towards the end. Possibly, several of these are possible, given that some of the proposed ingredients would help several different programs simultaneously, and perhaps these methods were arrived at through a gentleman's agreement to help several projects at once. It could even be that all four have taken, or perhaps are taking place at once. It's also possible that the barium polymer threads and other additives comprising or generating chemtrails could have an adverse health effects on a certain percentage of those who chance to breathe these additives is when they finally settle to the ground. This would be especially true of those who might suffer from allergies, have weakened immune systems, or be prone to respiratory illnesses. And barium is a metal that, in high enough quantities, is poisonous to mammals inhaling or ingesting excessive amounts of it. Could such a massive conspiracy be possible given the huge number of people that would have to be involved in it? The argument is that such a program could not be kept secret. Sooner or later, a word would leak out. Of course, that intention is wrong on its face, since obviously word has leaked out if people are suspecting that something is amiss. It wouldn't be the first such massive project. The Manhattan Project is that led to the development of American nuclear weapons during World War II involved many thousands of military men, scientists, and civilian workers. And that project was kept under wraps even after the first atomic bombs had been fired in U.S. deserts. Even when people had seen the huge fireballs generated, as they remained ignorant as to what exactly was being done in the desert, keeping a large project secret for an extended period is well within the capability of the United States government as demonstrated by history. And beyond that, in the argument in that such a conspiracy would involve large numbers of people involved in some sort of spraying system is also wrong. After all, is the secret is only at the point where the additive is placed in jet fuel. After that, says workers transporting fuel, fueling fuel tanks, and so forth, only are doing business as usual. If that suggests if the additive took place at a manufacturing level, few would be the wiser is that additives were in jet fuel, including pilots, air crews, those building the planes, and so forth. And this lines up is with what Dr. Barnes noted in his presentation about weather control and by the U.S. military. Says the chemicals he mentioned were created by an additive to the jet fuel. Thus, anyone piloting a plane need not be aware of what he is leaving behind in the exhaust of his jet. And those refueling jets need not be in on the secret. As far as they could tell, everything was perfectly normal, as they have no way of determining what is in the fuel as they are using or transporting, any more than a motorist can tell the octane levels in the gas is which he buys and drives. As for those adding the chemical to the fuel when manufacturing, all they need to know is that it must be added. Is not the why or wherefore. And government regulators can simply mandate that this or that additive be included in the formula and claim it is needed to make the engines operate properly. Few persons formulating or refining the fuel would ever know what the additive really did, and those few could be sworn to secrecy. Sadly, hypochondriacs have latched onto notion, of chemtrails turning anyone who believes they might be occurring into a potential crackpot in the eyes of doubters. These mentally ill individuals will claim to have become ill within minutes of seeing a chemtrail overhead, even though any chemicals in the fuel would take hours or even days to fall to earth, and by then would be swept far downwind from where they were released. Such reactions, even though without malice or attempt to deceive on the part of these hypochondriacs, have done much to discredit the idea of chemtrails, since those who are undecided can now easily dismiss such reactions as mass hysteria. But the evidence remains. Chemtrails appeared suddenly and continue to be seen in the sky on a regular basis. Is what its purpose is and what the long-term effects will be remain unknown. Given the devil may care attitude of those involved in weather control when it comes to other health issues, this is not reassuring. But the potential of chemtrails as weapons was admitted to in 2001 and by one U.S. Congressman and Representative Dennis Kucinich, who introduced the Space Preservation Act. This bill was designed to bring an end to a variety of weather and space weapons, including chemtrails, which were mentioned specifically in the last section of the bill, which listed the exotic weapon system to which it applied. electronic and psychotronic or information weapons, chemtrails, high altitude, ultra low frequency weapon systems, plasma, electromagnetic, sonic or ultrasonic weapons, laser weapons, strategic theater, tactical or extraterrestrial weapons, chemical and biological, environmental, or tectonic weapons. And the mainstream press gave no coverage to this bill, in itself rather ominous, and Kujanik was the only congressman to sponsor it, as the bill was sent to committee and died a quiet death. Yet, in this list are the weapons that the United States as well as other nations are undoubtedly developing and perhaps have even already yielded in satellites and ground-based systems. Is the list is so remarkable in what it includes, in addition to chemtrails, a mention of psychotronic weapons, suggesting mind control weapons, and tectonic systems, suggesting ways of generating earthquakes. There are those who are learning to control the weather, and it would appear the control they expect to exercise is anything but benign for those living on the face of our planet. Lightning is when you read about fire from heaven in the Bible, is you're generally reading about lightning. It was often seen as something uniquely under the control of the Lord. But today, mankind has harnessed electricity, and that control may extend to the control of lightning so that it might be used as a weapon. And lightning strikes are more common than most people suppose. At any given instant around the globe, there are generally around 2,000 thunderstorms in full swing, with 45,000 thunderstorms on an average day. The United States government has conducted tests to decrease lightning storms, and one might argue that such research might also be employed to create conditions that would increase lightning strikes as well, raining down the equivalent of biblical fire from heaven on an enemy or even a civilian population. Is research into controlling lightning was conducted by the U.S. Forest Service from the 1960s into 1973 under the Sky Fury program, is with the stated goal of reducing the number of forest fires counted or caused by lightning strikes. This research appears to have been centered around various cloud seeding techniques. The tests also appear to have been successful, but were never actually employed to reduce fires because, in the process of reducing lightning strikes, drought conditions were created, which raised the possibilities of fires starting from other sources. But these tests demonstrated in that it was possible to lower or raise the number of lightning strikes over an area. And it seems unlikely these are well within the capability of today's U.S. military. Is whether the results would be great enough to be viable from a tactical or even as a way to destroy enemy morale, and remains open to debate. Yet one thing is certain. In the time when powerful people might control lightning as well as spread droughts over areas as they see fit is here. Space-based mirrors. Under the guise of combating global warming, the late Edward Teller, often called the father of the H-bomb, suggested in the mid-1990s that creating an adjustable 2,000 kilometer wide space-based mirror would reflect sunlight away from the Earth, thereby causing a cooling of the upper atmosphere. And that weapons expert Teller undoubtedly knew, yet never admitted publicly, was that such a system didn't really need to have an adjustable mirror in order to reflect light into space. All that was really needed was any sort of reflective surface between the Earth and the Sun, and mylar sheets or other cheap materials could be hung in orbit and would do the job cheaply and efficiently. Why then Teller's call for an adjustable mirror? The answer is that a huge adjustable mirror in space could become a terrifying weapon capable of focusing sunlight on the surface of the Earth with great precision. Basically, it will become a big version of a magnifying glass small boys use to crisp ants. Only instead of ants, those on the receiving end would be human beings. It would be a cheap, highly effective death ray. Direct energy weapons, anyone? Such a system might also be aimed to glaze across the upper atmosphere, thereby becoming effective in changing weather patterns. It might fuel the ocean ahead of the hurricanes with heat, transforming mild storms into Category 5 monsters. It might even allow hurricanes to be steered from space toward enemy territory. And unlike some of the space-based microwave systems, excuse me, that have been proposed as weapons, a sunlight reflecting system would simply tap into the constantly available power from the sun, as there would be no need for vast solar panel arrays or nuclear generators to make electricity for this system. Sunlight is free in space. All that would be needed would be a few solar cells to provide the minute amount of energy needed to run the servo motors on each mirror in the system so that it can be quickly aimed at a target on the ground below. Once in space, such a system could be self-sustaining and ready to cook any portion of the globe any day of the week. And for all we know, such a system, perhaps disguised as a large solar array, is already orbiting the planet. The battle of the ionosphere. Almost 35 miles above the Earth's surface, an area known as the ionosphere begins, extending upward beyond 500 miles. Unlike the atmosphere, which is close to the Earth, this upper region is very thin and composed almost entirely of neutral gas and charged particles, mostly ions and electrons. This ionized medium is somewhat reflective to radio waves and can distort, reflect, or absorb them according to how gases are charged. As many have discovered, at night the ionosphere often becomes more reflective. Late at night, this permits AM radio waves to bounce back toward Earth, allowing radio stations that normally could be received within only a few miles of the broadcast tower during the day to be heard from hundreds of miles. In radiation coming from the sun naturally ionizes high atmospheric air to create the ionosphere. This means that a solar flare or other major event that changes the ionization in the upper atmosphere can alter the ionosphere to the point of degrading the performance of radio systems. Widespread power outages can result if solar radiation ionizes particles to the point is that they will reduce large transient currents in electric power transmission grids. Intense heating of the air can cause the ionosphere to bend light or radio waves through refraction, creating different densities of air. By heating one portion above or below another layer can also create a reflection of some waves. Obviously, the ability to transform the air to modify the behavior of radio waves in any way has serious military as well as economic ramifications. So, not surprisingly, then, the United States military has had its eye on ways such effects might be exploited. Lightning can also cause intense heating and ionization within the lower ionosphere. Man-made radio and radar transmitters can also modify the ionosphere and influence it to the point that radio waves traveling through these areas are deflected somewhat. Sometimes this effect can happen quite intense. The most famous example of this occurred in 1933 is when a powerful radio station in Luxembourg caused a weaker Swiss station signal to be modulated to a new and completely different frequency. This has since come to be known as the Luxembourg effect, and in the early days of radio, before this effect was understood, could often cause people to believe they were receiving non-existent radio stations or the like. As we'll see in a moment, there are a number of systems in place that are capable of modify the ionosphere in one way or another. Some of these modifications are more accidental than purposeful, at least at the time the equipment first came online. However, others appear to have been others appear to have been designed specifically to change the ionosphere, thereby modifying radio waves passing through it. In the process, these systems can also change the weather patterns on the Earth and may even have a deadly potential as weather weapons. Project Argus. The Earth has two radiation belts around it, and that are held in place by the magnetic field of the planet. The inner ring is called the Van Allen belt. After its discoverer, James Van Allen, it is now known to extend almost 4,000 miles upward from the Earth's surface. Since the discovery of this inner belt, an outer one has also been found, as with an empty space between the two, where a third will occasionally form during an intense solar activity. The Van Allen belt is very important to life on our planet, since these charged fields deflect protons, gamma rays, and alpha particles given off by the sun. Without this deflection by the Van Allen belt, nearly all life on Earth would cease to exist in short order. Given their importance, one might assume that everything would be done to protect the Van Allen belt, yet that isn't the case. The United States government admitted publicly, in an arguably rare bit of candor, that efforts were made during the 1950s to modify the Van Allen belt in order to create instant weather anywhere in the world. Chief White House advisor on weather modification, Captain Howard T. Orville, even went so far as to write in an national magazine, emblazoned with the cover showing a scientist in front of a machine that was transforming a sunny day into a cloudburst, that the United States Defense Department was perfecting a way to manipulate the changes of the earth and the sky, and so affect the weather by using an electronic beam to ionize or de-ionize the atmosphere over a given area. While the magazine picture suggested that some sort of electrical device was being used in this work, in fact, it was nothing so refined. Rather, the involved nuclear weapons exploded at altitudes high enough to disrupt the Van Allen belt. The project took place in mid-1958 as a part of the weather control project that became known as Project Argus, also sometimes referred to as Prime Argus. During the test, the United States Navy exploded 3 nuclear bombs high above the South Atlantic Ocean, with the nuclear fireballs rose into the lower regions of the Van Allen belt. Later, 2 hydrogen bombs were detonated over Johnston Island in the Pacific, again sending a nuclear fireball raising into the Van Allen belt's lower portions regions. These 5 explosions were basically carried out just to see what effect they might have on radio and radar transmissions. And like in many such shots in the dark, these had some unexpected results, creating bursts of EMP, electromagnetic pulse, that unexpectedly destroyed electronic circuits, as well as created the first man-made aurora over the North Pole. Meanwhile, and the public was being told that weather modification would pay off big benefits. In addition to Captain Orville's idea of dialing up weather changes, is Walt Disney Studios produced a short film which appeared on Disney's TV program as part of its Tomorrowland themed episode episodes named Eyes in Space, which included a segment on a fictional global weather control installation wherever alert technicians watch radar display panels on the lookout for violent storms. Once spotted, is robotic planes and missile batteries and or space-based installations then get rid of the problem storm. A hurricane was stopped in its tracks by a missile warhead detonated in its eye. The attempts to convince the public that weather control was a good thing soon dropped to the wayside, with government officials, as noted above, abruptly claiming that no attempts had been made to control weather and or that such things are impossible, a position that continues even today. Project Starfish. After Project Argus, and given the importance of the Van Allen belts to life on Earth, one might have thought in that the United States military would have banned such testing, or at least have approached such tests with a bit more caution. Not so. The United States military continued its assault on the Van Allen belts in the 1960s with Project Starfish, a program and with the expressed purpose of disrupting the lower sections of the Van Allen belt, according to a press release from that time. The aim was to cause a radio blackout for 7 hours. In this experiment, the inner Van Allen belt will be practically destroyed for a period of time. Particles from the belt will be transported to the atmosphere. It is anticipated that the Earth's magnetic field will be disturbed over long distances for several hours, preventing radio communication. The explosion in the inner radiation belt will create an artificial dome of polar light that will be visible from Los Angeles. Eyewitnesses noted the terrifying glow in the sky. Armed astronomers around the world protested the activity. Worse, the distribution to the Van Allen belt was such that a new belt appeared for a time in the lower regions of the Van Allen belt. So, rocketry of mistakes. As one might suppose that experiments that damaging the Van Allen belt for perhaps many years would have caused a moratorium of such activity, but it did not. The U.S. military, and most likely the USSR, continued such experiments. For example, in the mid-1970s, a Saturn V rocket was fired into a much higher altitude than it normally would achieve, is with the rocket exhaust resulting in a large ionospheric hole is that reduced by 60% the number of electrons normally found in the air or within a 1,000-kilometer radius of the event. This knocked out telecommunications for several hours below the hole. Despite the dangers to the Van Allen belt, the military believed they might use such artificial blackouts of communication to tactical advantage, and thus continued such experiments for the next 6 years. Part of these experiments, including the actions in 1981, is when NASA used the space shuttle to inject gas from its OMS orbit maneuvering systems rockets into space to create ionospheric holes while over the U.S. GWIN. You'll see what the acronym stands for. Excuse me. Another controversial U.S. military project of the 1970s was GWIN, Ground Wave Emergency Network. While the stated purpose of the project was to provide the U.S. military with a way to communicate with bombers and tanker bases during a nuclear war when conventional communications might not work, the project turned out to have other features that made it suspicious in the eyes of many. The GWIN system as originally proposed was to have consisted of about 86 ground stations that will communicate in both the low frequency radio band, 150 to 175 kilohertz, and the ultra high frequency radio band 225 to 400 megahertz, and 12 ground stations that would transmit only in the UHF band. During peacetime, the Gwin network was to operate in a maintenance mode. Each low-frequency transmitter broadcasting about 1% of the time, and each UAF transmitter turned on about 2% of the time. In order to continue functioning in time of war, the system was designed and with redundant sections that were hoped would enable it to maintain transmissions even if a large number of transmitters were knocked out. Gwin was controversial almost from the start because of questions about its safety to human health. Opponents argued is that the Gwin low-frequency transmitters were basically microwaves capable of endangering the health of those close to them is when they operated. Proponents agreed is that the very low power of the systems was well within the safety guidelines established by scientific standard-setting organizations. In the end, studies that raised the issue of possible health problems associated with EMFs, electromagnetic fields, caused Congress to postpone completions of the Gwin system in 1990. In not wishing to give up the program, the Air Force asked the National Research Council to convene an independent scientific committee to address the issue. The Committee on Assessment of the Possible Health Effects of Ground Wave Emergency Network was formed in the Research Council's Board on Radiation Effects Research. This group's final report was inconclusive at best. Says the committee found only a few biological studies on humans or laboratory animals conducted at frequencies in the low frequency band that were comparable to the transmitted signals from the Gwin system. Conclusions on the potential effects of low frequency fields from Gwin RNs, or probably radio networks, have therefore been inferred from available information on the biological interactions of fields oscillating at both lower and higher frequencies, with a recognition of the uncertainties associated with extrapolation across such a broad frequency range. Taken as a whole, the epidemiological literature indicates that there are not enough data to identify unequivocally, left alone to quantify, ELF related cancer risks. Moreover, differences in frequencies and other characteristics between ELF and Gwin fields convinced the committee that the ELF data were of limited usefulness in assessing potential health risk from Gwin. Assessing risk from exposures to low levels of any environmental agent is an uncertain enterprise. Epidemiological and animal studies are limited in statistical power to risk levels that are well above those that society often considers important. Judgments about the amount of human exposure needed to produce very small risk must rely on extrapolations from higher levels, and often on extrapolations from effects measured in other species. Uncertainties in risk assessment are particularly troublesome. As we concluded, therefore, that a traditional risk assessment could not be done. One second. There we go. Okay. Hope you understand. We've been getting played for a while. Looking up at them skies. They've been trying to control things and be God for a long time, right? So the committee basically could come to no conclusions as to whether or not the Gwin system posed a risk and how great the risk might be if it did. Then the paper the committee released did a 180-degree turn. After saying there was no way to determine the risk, is they gave a green light to the project, concluding in the summary, the result of a critical evaluation of published literature on the biological and health effects of EMFs and of an analysis of the relevance of this information to the potential health risk of Gwyn fields indicate that these fields should have only a minimal and probably undetectable impact on public health. The conclusions of this report reinforce those of the EIS in that no evidence of adverse effects of Gwyn fields on public health was found. The National Research Council Committee recommends that this report be used in conjunction with the original EIS as a comprehensive assessment of the potential public health impact of the Gwyn system. In other words, because there was no evidence showing the system to be safe, the committee concluded it posed no danger and thus was safe. And the logic is terribly and dangerously flawed. Yet there was no one willing to step forward and point this out. Gwyn was eventually mothballed to be replaced by the U.S. Milstar satellite communication system, in which permits military units to communicate from the ground employing SCAMP, Ground Terminal AN/PSC-11 transmitters. These send signals to satellite constellations to be rerouted to other satellites if necessary, and then back to the ground. As such, they pose little danger to the public or the ionosphere. Sadly, as we'll see in a moment, a new system in Alaska would soon be online that will pose such dangers. Over the horizon radar. Is radar, like most types of radio waves, travel in line of sight, straight lines. This greatly limits its range. Is with that in mind, and work has been done to create systems making it possible for the air to reflect a radar beam, causing it to gain added range by traveling over the horizon to detect aircraft or other targets moving beyond the line of sight. These OTH, over the horizon radar systems, focus radar beams on one section of the sky, heating it until the air molecules act like a radar mirror, bouncing the beams down around the horizon. Once the air is heated, subsequent radar pulses from the same array then are reflected to travel twice as far as they normally would. In effect, and the radar functions beyond the otherwise limiting curvature of the Earth. And most large nations have created such systems, as with one of the main U.S. installations being the Cobra Dane 95-foot phased antenna array at the Alaskan Araksan Air Station. Operational in 1977, this array can peer deep into both China and Russia from United States soil. The USAF apparently invested $60 million in modernizing the Cobra Dane system in 1990. Yet, according to government figures in 1993, and budgetary constraints forced an apparent discontinuation for most of the activities of the installation. One question that remains unanswered is whether a system capable of heating the atmosphere might not also be employed as a weapon. Certainly, and one might argue that creating a huge lens or mirror high in the atmosphere has the potential of altering the protective factor of the air. This could thereby allow dangerous levels of gamma rays or other radiation to reach the surface of the earth and to create detrimental harm to plants, animals, or people who are exposed to it. The devil's harp. The deadly potential of the previous government projects pale almost into insignificance when compared to the United States government's HARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. This system is a natural outgrowth of much of the work that the United States government has been doing in the area of modifying the ionosphere and developing a method of projecting energy toward various areas on the Earth. HARP was started during the 1990s. The main array of antennas for this system are based in the wilderness north of Alaska's Wrangell St. Elias National Park. Technical expertise and procurement systems are being provided cooperatively by the United States Air Force Laboratory and the Office of Naval Research and Naval Research Laboratory. Advanced Power Technologies Inc., APTI, was awarded the contract to design and build the key instrumentation based on a proposal submitted by the Office of Naval Research in 1992. Other organizations which have contributed to the program include the University of Alaska, the University of Massachusetts, UCLA, MIT, Stanford University, Dartmouth University, Clemson University, Penn State University, the University of Tulsa, the University of Maryland, Cornell University, SRI International, Northwest Research Associates Inc., and Geospace Inc. As one might expect, it has some very dangerous features that, if misused, might cause grave harm to the planet. Additionally, the system has been fielded in such a way to conceal its potential dangers. Investigative reporter Jerry Smith noted how the United States military might conceal the real purpose of the HARP. This is what he said. It is quite possible that the scientists working on HARP do not know what they are playing with. Beyond that, their ignorance might be compounded if HARP is indeed a secretive black ops military project. The military has devised a way of keeping secrets called compartmentalization, where each unit knows only what it needs to know. Only the control group knows what's going on. If there is a control group familiar with TMT's directing the actions of scientists unschooled in Tesla technology, those lower level operatives could be directed to wreak havoc with created weather or manufactured earthquakes. The HARP system looks a bit like a cable TV station, certainly not overtly ominous in its appearance, and the official description makes it sound quite benign. And while the HARP of a facility is expected to provide significant advancements in understanding ionospheric science by stimulating and controlling plasma processes in a tiny localized region within the ionosphere, it also has the potential for significantly affecting the planning for future satellite communication and navigation systems through improvements in reliability and economics. The official HARP website gives the following description of the instrument. High frequency phased array, a radio transmitter known as the Ionic Sphere Research Instrument, or IRI, used to stimulate small, well-defined volumes of ionosphere. An ultra-high frequency UHF incoherent scatter radar, ISR, used to measure electron densities, electron and ionic temperatures, and Doppler velocities in the stimulated region and in the natural ionosphere. HF ionosode, extreme low frequency and very low frequency receivers, magnetometers and ryometers, a LiDAR, light detection and ranging, with optical and infrared spectrometers and cameras, which will be used to observe the complex natural variations of Alaska's ionosphere, as well as to detect artificial effects produced by the IRI. But what is really going on with HARP? Is one purpose of the array seems to be focus energy on the ionosphere, heating it so is that the gases within it rise higher than they normally would. This curved bubble of gas forms a concave shell of ions, is which permit bouncing radar waves off them, somewhat like a curved mirror. Thus, and radio messages can be bounced and skipped over the horizon, traveling much further than normal. Of course, this begs the question, why do this? Doesn't the United States system of communication satellites, AWAC radar airplane capable of peering down and over the horizon, and similar technology make of the need to bounce radio waves off an atmospheric mirror obsolete? Logic would say as much. Why then is all the time and effort being expelled on it? And what might its real purpose be? Is one possibility is that it is a weather controlled device. For example, if the system can heat up the upper atmosphere to create its ionic mirror, it might also heat up the sky over an area, thereby radiating heat downward to add energy to a storm. Such a system might be capable of creating a tornado or guiding a hurricane toward a selected landmass. Another Hurricane Katrina, anybody? Oh. Another troublesome possibility is that since energy beams other than radio waves might be bounced off the ionic mirror that HAARP creates, it might be possible to bounce a powerful microwave bounced from the mirror to hit targets over the horizon, bathing them in dangerous radiation. In the Lahaina fire in California, is there any evidence in this might be actual purpose of the HAARP program? In fact, there is. According to reliable accounts, the ELF power array in HAARP can beam 1.7 gigawatts, that is 1.7 billion watts of energy into the ionosphere. And by the way of comparison, the United States Navy's AEW, Airborne Early Warning Platforms, put out somewhere around 2,400 watts of energy. This is significant because it means HAARP has over 400 times as much power as it should need to simply send radio waves over the horizon. The energy levels are more in line with weaponized beams rather than communications. It suggests a system designed to kill or maim rather than communicate. So, I'm going to end it there because I don't want this to go too long. I want you to be able to be palatable and take in the stuff. We got about 9 more pages, but I guess it's going to be a part 3. So we're going to start off with the woodpecker. So remember, either be a conspiracy theorist, be correct, or a coincidence theorist and be naive. I don't want you to be naive. To the next.
Never surrender. We never give in. We never quit. We never give up. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Doing all to stand. We stand, therefore. We don't never give up. Are you hearing what I'm saying? If you're the last man on earth, swing the sword till you fall. Swing till you fall. Keep swinging till you fall. Are you hearing what I'm saying? That's how we're programmed as Christians. Amen.